Welcome to This Old App, a podcast about learning, coding, smashing stuff together, breaking things apart, startups, failing, winning, and any other buzzwords we can think of.
All right. So I'm in the middle of the beginning of the new job.
Right.
And I think on CTO Think, we talked about the process of the recruiting. So now I'm on board. And now we'll talk about the tech side of things as much as I can. It's still an employer. I'm not going to reveal secrets, but Go.
Oh no,
Go
you're working for the man now. Come
on. I've worked for the last 10 years, mainly on Ruby on Rails and JavaScript. A lot more JavaScript the last 4 to 5. So now I'm being introduced to two new things. One, service-oriented architecture, and 2, using Go to implement the services. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk today about Go, my introduction to it, how I'm learning it, what I think about it. And so let me go into think about the first time I heard about Go. I remember there was some developer doing an online live, maybe it was like some kind of Google product conference. Basically, they were saying, we decided to write a new language, and people were already starting to get, new language every other day kind of thing. So everyone's like, why do we need this? And it was a language based upon speed and simplicity, and it was mainly for people that were experienced with C and the complexities around writing that. And so some Google developers, as I remember it, decided to create a new compiled language, type-safe language that would achieve the goals of C with the simplicity of Ruby type of writing. Maybe that's the best way to say it. So I think, I don't know where the choice was made, but at some point in Hierology's background, a choice was made to start implementing services, and they were, I think, deciding between Elixir, which is a language that a lot of Rubyists are going towards, and then I think the other option would be Rust, perhaps. And they chose Go. So my team uses Go for the code. So the first thing I did when I was kind of told that I was joining a team using Go is I went to my tested and true tutorial teacher, Stephen Greider of Udemy. Mm-hmm. And it's not too long. It's a really good introduction to Go and the way that he teaches. And I just listened. I started doing some of the tutorial. You have to install Go. I used Brew on Mac for that. That was pretty simple. And then followed through the tutorial. And, Greider doesn't go through the book style of here's variables, here are control structures, if else, here are switches. He more starts building things and teaching you as you go along.
Sure.
And which I like. I think it's more interesting to learn that way. And so I did that introduction, and it was extremely helpful for day one. Because I did this tutorial. I did about 2/3 of it before I started the gig. And it helped a lot because as soon as I started seeing Go code day one, I wasn't lost in what I was looking at. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean I wasn't lost in the way that they built things. So it's not like I walked in the door and I was like, I know Go and I know how you built this. And Lord knows I have not felt great about my experience for the last week just because of taking on a really big card. And I was like, man, I am so slow in this. I could have built this in a day in Rails. But the Go is interesting because it feels like it was written by people who write code by themselves. They don't like in Rails and Ruby. I'm very used to people naming variables with a full word or a noun or whatever it may be. JavaScript the same way. In Go, it's very much the standard to use single letter variables. And that's like part of the style.
Right.
There is a Go tidy method for code style. You don't really alter it. Like you don't really go into Go like you do with ESLint and then say, I'm going to use the Airbnb listing. I'm going to use the Ruby on Rails Rubocop settings based on this company. And then I'm going to tweak them as I go along. It seems like everyone just uses the Go tidy to follow these rules for your style. And I'm not used to that. I'm not used to it being prescribed that much, especially when I'm like, aren't explicit variables better? Isn't 2 spaces better than freaking indentation with 8? Which is crazy town to me. It's like, what? But also there's no bike shedding over it. Nobody's really debating it. We don't have discussions on, should I indent here? Should I put a space here, kind of, or a new line? It's more like, nope, we're just going to follow that standard. Which I haven't felt any pain to say like, hey, we should break from this and go somewhere else. Yeah. It's just more of like, oh, okay, this is how we're going to do it.
And that actually makes things easier too, doesn't it? It eliminates the cruff that you have to fight through of the analysis you get yourself in with 2 spaces, 4 spaces, and all that stuff. If you've got a set style to go in.
Yeah. Now what I don't know, and this is part of me coming on the team, I have to ramp up faster because I think we are, like, the company is learning Go as we move along, as we're progressing. So I would not say that we are a Go expert firm. We've got great services running really fast and they're tested. And so testing is a part of the culture, which is great, both on the developer side and QA. But that has nothing to do with Go really. But Go has testing tools, and so at least from day one, I am looking at an approach to test involved development. I'll put it that way. Mm. And so that was definitely a plus. What I'm not used to is I don't know all the tricks. So like in Ruby on Rails, I know how to immediately test a specific function, a specific method, so to speak, or test it. Like if I have an assertion, I want to just run that one assertion. I have no idea how to do that in Go yet. I'm running the whole page, the whole file of code of tests. And that's kind of weird that it's not that simple. There's a developer, there's an editor, like talking about the editor. I started using something called it's called Golang, which is J2E or J something. The folks is it Eclipse? The editor? I don't know. There's this editor that everyone uses called Golang. Editor,
yeah.
And I think that it's run by a big company that does Java stuff. And everyone's telling me, we just use Golang. Now, just so you know, the name of Go as a language is shitty for searches on Google. Just pure horrible.
Sure.
So everyone uses Golang typically as how they name it, even though that's not the official name. It's like, at least you can grab onto more letters for the search. Sure. So that's a downside to Go by far, is the ability to search for things. The second problem is that if you have a problem with the editor Golang, Google is like, you mean Golang, don't you? I'm like, no, I mean Golang. And that is a problem. It's just a pain in the butt because I live by searching for bugs and syntax approaches through Stack Overflow and Google, like most people. And so I'm always like, man, it makes it so much harder with the way that they name this. So definitely not. I'm sure it was cute when they started it. I wish I would have called it Gopher. That would have been better. That's their logo, is all these little cartoon gophers, which are cute. But it's not cute when you're searching for Go and there's a million things that are unrelated to the language you're searching for.
Right.
So I'm still trying to learn the tricks of Golang, and finally I got kind of frustrated with Golang not behaving like I expected. So I installed a few plugins with VS Code, and I'm like, I don't know that I need this Golang thing. The people that are working with VS Code in Go have built in a lot of great tools with it.
Right.
So I'm actually leaning towards using VS Code more, and I might give the license that we got for it to somebody else when they onboard. But we'll have to see, because when I pair with my other teammates, they're used to seeing Golang, and if I want faster help from them, I kind of need to use that tool. So I think I might use it for pairing and then code on my own with VS Code. But going back into the language. Let's say going back to one of our episodes on this old app, we talked about TypeScript, and I kind of dove into TypeScript and is it a value? I can definitely say that if you have never used a type-safe language, you've only used dynamic stuff, and you want to bridge into a Rust, Elixir, actually Elixir's dynamic. If you want to get into Go, learning TypeScript will help you, because if you've never built typefaces for and stuff, interfaces for types for your data, it's going to be an abrupt, a wide awakening to you about all this extra code you need to write just to define what your data types are.
Sure.
And they do that a lot with Go. So the way that the particular code I'm looking at has an excessive amount of interfaces, which may be excessive based on what I'm looking at. Because I'm like, man, I got to go a lot of layers deep in my brain to hold on to what I'm working with. But end of the day, after you look at it enough, it seems like it's not that hard. I also got a book. I'm jumping all over the place here, but I got a book called Head First Go.
I love the Head First books. The Head First,
yeah, the Kathy Sierra style. Yeah. So that's been helpful, and I'm kind of filling in some of the blanks that Grider didn't cover, because he went really fast, which was great. But then there's details, and I'm now like, what's going on? So that has been a nice read on the side, but it's been at a slower pace than I got through the tutorials. And
let me ask a question. So you were brought on as a senior engineer, correct?
Yeah.
How's your ego dealing with having to come in and ask for help?
Oh, like when I pair with so I got a friend that I already worked with a while back, and I keep telling her, hey, I feel stupid. Like I'm just totally honest. Like, man, I feel inefficient. Man, I feel slow. And she's just like, quit worrying about it, And that's what I would tell my students or somebody that was coming on board, is like, hey, you got to learn this. Don't worry about it. So my ego is getting kicked on the learning side. Like on the coding side, on the software management side, everything seems normal. Like I have built everything that this company has built, in the sense of I've solved a lot of the problems that they've had to solve myself or with my teams.
Right.
So I don't look at none of the problems are like, whoa, how, like, what are you doing? This is crazy. Or this is such a different scope than I've ever dealt with. Like all that, I feel very comfortable with. It's really more of how is this built, and can I understand the language enough to solve the problem fast with the code? That's where I feel really dumb. That's where I feel really slow and inefficient. And that's what's definitely kicked the ego down a notch.
Right.
But at the end of this week, I got through each layer of this card, which had multiple layers. And by the end of it, I'm like, okay, if you gave me this problem again next week, I knock it out in a day, 2 days probably. And I did have to write some Ruby code to solve a part of the problem, which felt good because I nailed that in about an hour. I was like, sweet, I'm done with this part. But I really did, yeah. I mean, it's definitely feeling less assured of yourself is something that someone with 20 years of experience still has to go through when you're told this is your card for the week and you have not really used this language before. So yeah, I have to work through that.
And that's what I was after was it's probably no matter what job you start, and even if you're in the middle of a job, something will come up where you're just not going to know. In most organizations, that's going to be just fine. It's about your ability to learn, your ability to improve than it is your knowledge at the moment.
And now let me also say, I'm not alone. This is an amazing team. It's been a very short time, but there's the way that they've crafted this engineering team, the positivity, the helpfulness. I have reached out to every single person on my pod, and I've reached out to people on other teams with questions, and I always get people that are helpful. They like no ego, just let me help you out as best I can. And that is more reassuring than anything. And I feel for the people that are in my shoes that go on to some of the teams I've joined in the past where you ask a question and the person acts like, how can you not know this kind of thing?
Right.
And I that's how I learned the hard way, working with some really devs better than me, and some of their attitudes at times were a little flippant. And I'm just like, just give me the answer, man. I don't really care about how smart you are. But everyone here is just really extremely helpful. And I will not put to the side the fact that I know someone already and I can talk to her and understand what she knows and what I've known in the past, which is helpful.
Sure.
I can kind of lean on her a bit just because we have that familiarity, but I've been able to reach out to other people on the team with a question. One thing that's really sweet is that there is a person dedicated to databases and SQL.
Yeah.
And everyone goes to him for SQL kind of questions and Postgres questions. And I've never had that. I've always been that person, and I know SQL, I don't know, 60%. Well, I know I can always write a query to solve the problem. I just don't know if it's the best practice. I don't know if it's efficient. So I've always lived knowing SQL rather than like an ORM or an active record thing. But now that there's a person that I can say, here's a query I got. How do I make this better? That's what I'm looking forward to, because this person knows a lot of stuff on databases, and he's really quick on his answers. And I'm just like, yes, this is going to be fun. So I'm looking forward to having like that person involved with stuff I work on, because I've just never had that before.
Well, I'm interested. I want to diverge on that for a second. Is it worth, and I don't know what the process is there, is it worth having him review all the database calls in the code base. As a code reviewer, when you make a change, there's an SQL query here. Does he go through and look at all the SQL queries you've added?
No.
Okay.
Only if you ask him to. If you were to ask him, he would. But
Yeah.
It's not. He's not charged with being overall DB, overall database query interaction reviewer.
Okay. Yeah.
That's not his role. I think he is just usually the first person that is presented with database related problems, but it's more about, I think, the architects that are involved at a higher level with design of the applications and solutions probably interface with him more at that level.
Okay.
But that's all I've gathered so far.
Sure.
I don't think it'd be that efficient for someone to do that necessarily across 30 people. But
that's what I was trying to figure out is does that make sense? And I guess at the end of the day, you run it in there, and if you have performance issues, you tweak it after.
Yeah. Going back to Go, talked about testing. The database interaction there is no ORM that I know of for Go.
Mm-hmm.
So we are connecting to the database. We're caching things. So everything is pretty much a straight interaction at a database connection level. That's different because it's been a long time. I guess I did with PHP and MySQL, but that's been a long time since I actually worried about DB connections and straight SQL calls, unless I was doing something that really was where Active Record was inefficient for getting the queries across. It's really, I think the hardest part about Go is I don't see a lot of comments. I don't like a number of things. One, when I do Google searches again are hard. And even when I do find answers, I don't find a lot of in-depth solutions. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense. Like, I don't see a lot of people talking about complex applications being solved. I see a lot of code examples that are very easy, kind of like, this is how you do if then else kind of stuff. Like, yeah, but what if I'm trying to test a very complex data structure or something? And I don't see a lot of examples of that. I'm using those examples I see in our existing code base, but I'm not seeing them online that much. Right. I'm not seeing as like the community is definitely not as show off as much as the JavaScript community is and the Rails community, which like to show off what they've built. So I don't see that as much. And so that's probably, I would say that might be a negative in my mind. It seems to be more of we're all like, if you're using Go, you're probably really intelligent and you just code things yourself. That might be a bad characterization of it, but that's what I'm kind of gathering.
Sure.
And so that is just not what I'm used to coming from JavaScript and Rails lately. And I wish there was more people showing off so I could see what they're doing. But the other side of that is Go is friggin' fast. Holy crap. It compiles and tests faster than anything I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Now that has nothing to do with the syntax, but man, blazing fast for builds and stuff. Like
right.
It kicks Rails' butt, Ruby's butt on that side. So there's definitely benefits for using it for a service-oriented architecture. If there's anything I learned about serverless and JavaScript lately, that whole cold start crap just doesn't cut it.
Right.
But with Go, man, if you're going to do an SOA, something like Go or Rust or Elixir, definitely I see the value in it tremendously. It is the fastest code I've ever written before.
Right.
In the way, how fast it compiles, and of course at the binary, it's just quick as anyway.
Well,
So
that's what I gathered because I did a little reading on Go as you were making this leap. I was like, well, maybe I'll take a look at learning it, and then that way we'll be able to talk the same language. I looked at it, I saw that it was, and I just looked at it as Go versus Node. That's what I typed to just see what it said. And it said, yeah, Go is incredibly fast, and here's the syntax. And I took a look at the syntax. I'm like, that's nothing like what I've done in the past. I'm out.
But if you were to tell me that, you were going to take your company towards a service, I'd be like, take a look at Go. I mean, it's if you are going to go down that path, and that's a whole other discussion of SOA versus monolith kind of thing.
Right.
I would say Go it's definitely a valid choice. It's got a lot of tools. The language has a lot of built-in packages. It has a package management system. The package manager, unlike NPM and Bundler that I'm used to, is antiquated to some degree. It's pulling from GitHub directly in most cases. I'm not really down with that. But that's what I got. Internally, we have our own packages that we build. And so we do a lot less of using from the open source community, I guess. I don't know if that's a product of the developers that started out using it or what, but we have a lot of internal shared tools that our services utilize. And so I'm getting kind of used to how you structure these services to interact with each other. That's a little different.
Sure.
Talked about testing. Talked about the IDE. What else would there be? I don't know. I'm enjoying learning a new language for sure. I mean, I've got so many now in my background, and I would say that the language itself is not the hardest part. I'm at that point now where I think my brain, just like if you learn another language, you can start to build on that faster, learn each new one quicker. And in terms of speaking language, reading for code, I'm definitely at that stage where learning Go is not the hardest part. It's the getting into the typeface. Oh, here's the other part: pointers and pass by value, pass by reference.
Okay. So, yeah, very, very C-like.
Yes. And one of the guys I work with, I'm like, why do you like Go? And he's like, oh, I like the memory management stuff. I'm like, what? Like, why would you want to go back to that? Like, come on. But so that's a little bit mind-bending when you first see it. But then after, like, Stephen Greider did a great example of explaining why you're doing it, what it's doing. And after that, my brain is able to kind of compute it faster. Why are we using a pointer? Why are we using a memory address? So that takes a little practice, but I really didn't find that to be as big of a learning curve as I expected.
Right.
I already knew what pointers were. I just had chosen languages that never made me think about it. So that's a little different. But I don't know. It's been both fun and frustrating. Like you said earlier, kick to the ego at times, despite the experience. But I also, even when I get frustrated, I kind of like have to bring myself down to, all right, you're just learning this approach to solving problems. Like any other language, you will climb the hill and be okay, like you have been in the past. And
right.
And even every time I inherit a Rails application from somebody else, I'm like, what the heck were you doing here? And I have got to figure out how they approached Rails. So that's always a challenge, no matter what, even when I've been working on it a while. I think that's what's hard for new developers is they have no context for having learned that many things. They don't know that what they're going through is normal. They just feel dumb. And it's like, no, you don't need to feel dumb. this is how you're going to feel every time you inherit a new existing application. You got to figure out what the other person was trying to do, or what the other team was trying to do. And when you're trying to learn the language and do that, it's even doubly hard. So give yourself a break is all you can do. So, yeah, so that's where I am. I mean, I'm visiting they have an on-site twice a year with all the remote people. And so I'll be in town next week for that starting tomorrow. So,
Okay.
But yeah, that's where I am. And so far, so good.
So I was looking it up as you were talking. Is anybody from the office going to GopherCon in San Diego?
No one's talked about it, but we're not I wouldn't call us a Go shop yet. Like we are a team learning Go, and I believe that I haven't talked about it at length with the folks that I work with and for. But I think what they're wanting to do is build the services and build upon Go so that we are a company that becomes that. And they had a developer before that left that was really the catalyst of all this. And so
that's kind of humorous in itself.
In what way? In what sense?
In the fact that he was the catalyst and he's no longer there.
Well, but you have to. Every company has to deal with that to some extent, right?
Oh no, absolutely. It just struck me as funny.
But yeah. So I mean, it's not like they were left holding the bag with bad code. It's just more of oh, you were the well, and this may be what I gather, and this is totally my observation from afar, 10 times developer doing all the work themselves. And so in a way they were left holding the bag. It's not a bad bag. It's just that you look in the bag and not everyone speaks the same way about what's in there. So I think that in a way the company's goal is we need to improve upon our approach of Go like we do with the existing Rails app. That's what we need to grow is our services and our Go knowledge. And I'll be part of that.
Sure.
But I have to, in my mind, I'm like, I can do everything about the development, except I have to learn Go well enough to speak to it. And that's what I don't have under my grasp yet. But the funny thing is I'll sit there and I'll go like, okay, so in this Go service, I'll ask questions to people about, so do we have XYZ features that I have in Rails usually? And they're like, no, we build it ourselves or we don't have it. And I'm like, oh, we got to change that. Like that would be ideal to add the ability to test this faster, to add integration testing that's faster. Because I feel like we're bogged down a little bit with very manual processes for testing that I'm like, that should be automatic. And one of my very first things to do was to start doing load testing and stuff. And they hadn't needed to, and we still found out we didn't need to do it that much. Like it's so fast right now that we aren't even touching upon the limits that we would be at. But it's those kind of things. Like we don't have the infrastructure that I'm used to with Rails, where I code and then let other things test for me completely. And that's what we need to get, is that foundation of a really efficient software construction tool set, I think. So that's what I'm guessing we're aiming for. But at this point, I've been so focused on learning and solving what has been assigned to me that I really haven't thought about big picture stuff. And I'm sure I'll be there's goals that the team has that I should wait and hear before I start saying we need to do this, kind of stuff. So
yeah, you're still in scramble mode.
Yeah.
So and that's the way it is everywhere, right? You're too when you're new on something, when you're new to something, you're too focused, too tunnel visioned. You need a little time to let everything slow down.
Yeah.
A bit.
So anyway, that's where I am with Go. And as I learn more, I can definitely speak more to it. And but right now, I would say I've talked about everything I can think of at the moment involved with it.
Yeah, I think there's a future discussion on service-oriented architecture for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So, all right, well, cool. Sounds like it's a good start and it's a good place to be.
Good so far. All right. Talk to you next week.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening to This Old App. Show notes and previous episodes can be found on our website at www.thisoldapp.online. Reviews on Apple iTunes are always appreciated and help promote the show. For questions, comments, or things you would like to hear on future shows, please email us at hello@thisoldapp.online. Show music is Guns Blazing by Fab Claxton, licensed by Pond 5. Voiceover work by MeganVoices.com. You'll hear from us soon.